Hey guys, welcome back to the gun room. Today we're going to be doing a video on a disassembly of the SKS rifle. I have a Chinese model. This is one of the custom ones I'm working on right now, and a Yugoslavian model. This video we're going to be doing the Yugoslavian model, the 5966. So let's get started. Okay guys, we're going to start the disassembly. We have a Yugoslavian SKS here, and with any disassembly, first step is to check to make sure that the firearm is unloaded. And this is the Yugoslavian model. This is the M5966 version, the one with the grenade launcher. The only thing one thing to note about this is that I have changed the stock on this. This is I'm running a Tapco stock on this, and when you do the conversion, you'll end up using detachable magazines versus the built-in standard magazine that comes on your regular SKSs. So that's the only thing that's going to be different about this rifle. So with that, remove your magazine, see if this one's unloaded, and then all you got to do is check to pull your bolt back and look to see that the chamber is empty, which it is. And with that, the firearm is safety checked and we can begin the disassembly. Okay guys, now that we have the firearm safety checked, the first order of business is to remove the stock. And what I did was I upgraded the stock system on this. What I had before was just the plain Jane wooden stock, and I'll get you a little shot of that later. I replaced it with the Tapco stock, and this is the 6-position stock with the grip. So if you have this stock, the first thing you have to do to remove it is to remove your grip. And how you do that, if you for some reason don't remember how you put it back on, there's a little latch down here for storage. You look down, there's a little screw down there. All you got to do is remove that screw and your grip will come right off. Now just for the ease of this video, I've already loosened it quite a bit, that way you don't have to watch me unscrew this thing for a minute. And once you get that, your grip will come right off. All it is just that little screw. I'll get it out for you. Well, it ain't little, but this screw feeds right in through here in the bottom part of your stock. Now it's what holds your grips on. So now we got that out of the way. We can get access to our trigger guard here. The grip itself, actually, when it's on there, covers up part of the trigger guard that you actually need to get to. So there's actually no getting around to that. But now that once you have your grip off, it'll expose your entire trigger guard. And back here, get it a little wider here. You'll see this thing right here. And what that is, that's your trigger guard latch. And all it is a spring, and that's what keeps your trigger guard connected to the other end of your rifle. Now this sometimes can be a real pain. It just depends on your rifle. What I found is there's a little hole here, and if you get a small screwdriver, a punch, pliers, whatever you can do, if you exert your force in that hole versus actually on the whole spring itself, it'll go really easy. Because I've seen videos of people using hammers, and it's just, you're making it 10 times harder. But all you gotta do is put it in there. Like I said, this can be kind of stiff. You'll push it down until it pops. And once you get that, your whole trigger guard can come out. Get a close-up here. All that is that piece of metal that you can bend back and forth. It's just a spring, and it has a little lip underneath there, and that's what goes through this portion of your trigger guard, and it just holds that together under spring tension there. So that's your first step, is to then removing the stock, is you actually have to take your trigger guard out. And on the Yugoslavian model, it did come with a grenade launcher, but they all came with bayonets in one form or another, and I have the blade bayonet. And to remove the stock here, you'll also have to fold that out. And this is under spring. So you just lift this up, it'll snap over. You push on the bottom side of your gun, and it'll come right off. There's no point in taking the 6-position stock that's held together by Allen screws. For just simple disassembly, there's no point in taking that. So here's your stock. That's the first step, and disassembling the rifle. Alright guys, now that we have the stock off, the next thing is to get your bolt assembly out. And to do that, you're going to see this little lever here. And what that is called, that's a takedown latch. And all you do is pull it up like this, and it goes through, but it does not come out. And you'll pull it out. Sometimes you'll have to wiggle it. And once it comes out, this is your dust cover. That actually slides in here. I guess mine had a little more spring tension on it. If you pull that out, that's your dust cover. And then you're going to have this spring here. You'll pull that out. This is the recoil spring. You'll notice that half of it is straight and the other half is all windy. You want to make note of that because the windy part is actually what goes in first when you go to reassemble this. But inside you have your small and your large spring guides that go inside your recoil spring. And then once you have your dust cover off, your latch, you want to make sure that's out, and your recoil spring, your bolt carrier and your bolt will just pull straight back. And sometimes they come up together, sometimes they don't. You pull straight up. And yeah, we got two pieces here. This is your bolt carrier. And then this little guy under here, this is actually your bolt. And what these guys, you can see right here, they go together. They'll ride together like this when they're locked together, but I mean, they come apart. So that's how that works. When you go to put that back in, this is actually how that system rides together, the bolt and the bolt carrier. Now that we have our bolt assembly taken out and our stock off, our next step is to remove the gas tube. And to do this, you got this little guy right here. It's this little hand guard catch. It's a little lever. It's pretty tight. You might have to use a screwdriver. Most people use a screwdriver. You can use the tip of a bullet, whatever works best for you. What you'll want to do is, if you can't lift it up, some of them are so worn that you can just flip them up, but most of them, when they come new, they're really hard to get. You want to lift up just a little bit with the tip of your screwdriver. There's a little divot in here. You'll see it'll catch on there. Mine I can move up by my hand once I get it out of there, but this will slide up just like this. And when you're first taking off your gas tube, you're only going to want to pull it up just to where it gets free. So like a 45-degree angle. What that does is it actually moves this little piece here that has a flat portion of it, and you're just going to want to move this up until you can slide this up. You don't want to go any more than that, and I'll tell you that in a second. There you go. So right when you can move your gas tube up, this is going to come straight up. You're going to come straight up and pull this way, and it'll come right off. You don't want to bend it up too much because this lip here of your gas tube actually slides onto your gas valve, and you don't want to break this, because if you break that, then you're going to lose gas and you're going to have to replace it all. It ain't going to work. But anyway, here's your gas tube, and inside your gas tube, you'll see it right here and here. I'll get it knocked out for you. This one's pretty dirty. I went out and shot this rifle quite a bit the other day, so it's in need of a good cleaning. But inside your gas tube is your piston. So that's what that is right here. Like I said, sometimes that'll stick a little bit. This is really dirty. I shot it quite a bit, so yeah, you can see my hands are pretty dirty. But here's your gas tube. And I'll do a later video on how to take your hand guards off. See a lot of videos on YouTube on how to remove those. If you update your SKS rifle, you'll have to take the old one off, and that can be sometimes a real pain. But I'll put a video up for you guys on how easy way to do that. So here's your gas tube, here's your piston. Next is your gas valve, and on the Yugos, these are only on the Yugoslavian models, or any model. I don't know if they have them on the Romanian model, but anyway, they're on the models that have the gas or the grenade launcher. And what this does is this regulates how the firearm fires. In the down position, your firearm will shoot in semi-auto. You pull the trigger, you'll fire around, and it'll automatically cycle the next one. But what this is for is when you lift this straight up, that stops the semi-auto mode. You pull the trigger, it fires one, the bullet and the casing will stay in there. It won't recycle that out. And what that's meant for is for your grenade launcher. When this is down, it's in semi-auto. But when you lift it up, this guy right here can lift up. And what this is a sight for your grenade launcher here. And these are rifle grenades. The grenades have a stick on them, and you slide them down your barrel into this launcher here. And then what you do is you would take a blank round. You don't ever want to use live ammo. You take a blank round and you put it in and you lift this up. This is your aimer for your sights here. And what would happen was when you pull the trigger, you wouldn't have any projectiles come out. You just have all the gases. And that would launch your grenade out. Because if you had any projectiles in there, you're going to fire a bullet in your grenade and you're probably going to have a bad day. But what happens is this gas valve, when it's up, you put your one blank round in there, you'll fire once, that casing will stay in there, all the gas will come out, and it'll launch your grenade out, and this is how you aim. To take this gas valve up, or out, is when it's in the up position, all you do is you push out. And that'll pull your gas valve up, and this little knob here will actually come straight up. And you might need either a little magnet or a pair of pliers, it all depends on your model. You'll have this little guy here, but mine decided to stay in there. Let's see if I can get it for you guys. Actually, no. There's a little spring. Get a hold of it here for you. Here it is. That spring actually goes in the bottom of this, right here, just like that. And then with that taken out, your gas valve will actually just slide out. Now, when I first bought my Yugoslavian model, my gas valve was all rotted out. I mean, the gun would barely even cycle. So I went and bought a new one. And company from, I think it was in North Carolina, they did a really good job on it. And once I reinstalled this and put the new one in and took the old one out, my SKS cycled perfectly. But that's how you remove that, your gas valve. So you'll want to just remember that spring might not come out when you go to lift this little guy out. But now that we've taken the gas valve out, we're going to come back to this guy right here. Like I said, you don't want to lift that straight up, and this is why. I'll get a shot of it for you. There's a little guy in there. It's all under spring tension, so you're going to want to make note of that. But what that is when you go to remove this guy right here, you have what is it? I'm trying to think of the name here for you. It is it's a the piston extension. What you do is you're going to lift this up here very slowly, and you either want to put your hand on here or a screwdriver or something to catch this. But you lift it up more than that 45-degree angle, and it'll start to come out. This has got a pretty strong spring on it, but you got your spring here and your extension here. So that's why you don't want to lift this straight up when you first take your handguard off, because if you take it off too much, you'll end up taking your gas tube off, and this will shoot straight out underneath of it. So that's why you don't want to do that. But that's how you take your gas tube off, and with that you have your gas valve, your piston, which is inside your gas tube, and then you also have your piston extension and your piston extension return spring. Alright guys, well that's the basic disassembly of this rifle. I mean, you start from your dust cover and you move over your springs, you get your trigger mechanism and your bolt, and then you move over to the gas tube with your piston and your different method of springs and your gas valve. There are a few other things on this rifle that you can take apart. I'm just going to mention them briefly. I won't take them all apart just for the purpose of this video. One of them is your rear sight. This is just like the Mosin. I mean, it's all Russian design. It's all on a spring here. I want to say it's a leaf spring. There's just a pin right here. I'll get it right here. This pin here. If you want to remove this front sight for whatever reason, you just need to knock that pin out. And this is under spring tension. It's kind of a pain to do, especially putting it back in. Just like I said, for the purpose of this video, we're not going to be taking it apart, but for whatever reason if you want to remove this actual sight, sometimes people have to replace them, or if you want to get under there to clean the cosplane out, if you have a really, really good rifle, you just need to remove that pin, and this will come out, and your leaf spring will come out, just like the old Mosins. And then over here, on the Yugoslavians, you can take all this apart for the most part. Like I said, there's really no point to it. I mean, it's just 10 times, you're making your job 10 times harder than it needs to be. You can actually take these sights off, but I mean, most of the time it's not worth it, because you can take your front sight out too if you have to adjust it. I mean, they have tools for that you can do. But when you're switching your SKS over to make it more modern, the government has enacted it's called the 922 compliance. You can look it up. There's so many points that are associated with parts you have to replace to make it American, a certain percentage to be American made, and you can look that up online. But one of them is to replace your this grenade launcher here with a muzzle brake, and to do that, there's a pin here. You'll pin that through, and this will screw off. Like I said, again, we're not going to be doing that for a basic assembly, but just keep that in mind that when you're updating your rifles, you're going to want to make sure that you're doing it legally. And that's how that goes about. Another thing is with people who really want to update their rifles, a lot of people take off this bayonet and either not have one just because of the weight or the need. But also on some of the SKS rifles, they have bipods that can go in place of your bayonet. So I mean, that's an option if you want it to. All you do is to remove the bayonet is there's a screw right here. I'll remove it for you guys. This is under spring tension here, because how this works is there's a spring in here and you'll pull it out. See how it moves along there? There's a little latch here. It'll slide up, and there's a latch here too. That's the locked position. That'll go up against your stock, and you have to push this down in order to move it. And when it moves straight up like this, it'll latch here, and that's how it locks. That way you don't have a bayonet that's just flopping all over the place. Alright guys, now that the rifle's taken apart, we're going to put it back together. And to start off with, we're going to take our piston extension here and the extension spring, slide that right back in. This will go right back through here. This can be a little difficult. Like I said, this spring is pretty strong. You can use a screwdriver, pliers, whatever you want. All you got to do is, if you can't do it by hand, this is going to go right back in here. And if you can't do it with your finger, like I said, use a screwdriver or whatever just to put on the end here so you can push it back even farther. You're going to push it back as far as you can, and then you're going to bring this down just to where that'll catch. And like I said, you're going to be really, you're going to want to be really careful, because it's a strong spring, and if you don't get this locked right, that thing is just going to come flying at you. So you want to take note of that. So you don't want to lock it, because otherwise it'll fly out again, and you need to get your gas tube in, but you just need to get it just enough where it catches and it's safe to hold on. But just keep that in mind. Okay, our next step is to put the gas valve back in. It's this guy right here. And it just slides right back in, but you want to make sure that the big hole is towards the top. And you're only going to move it in until you line these large holes up. You're going to get in just like that, and you're going to grab this guy. You're going to make sure that spring's back in there. This is just going to drop straight down in. Once you have these lined up, you push this down and push it in, just like this. And now it's back in alignment here with your grooves. And you're going to make sure you do this before. Make sure you put your grenade sight back down before you decide to flip this back down. So all you got to do is drop it down, and now you got your gas valve is locked back in place. Alright, now we got our gas valve back in. We're going to put our gas tube back in. And first step is to take your piston. If you notice on your gas tube, you're going to have a smaller hole and a larger hole. You're just going to slide your piston right back in. Make sure it's lined up right. It's just going to go right back in so it's flush. You don't want it protruding out too much like this. Just make sure that's good and flat. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start with this larger end. Let me get a close up here for you. Right here, you kind of got two little levels here, little lip here. That's going to slide right onto the edge of your gas tube, or gas valve, excuse me. That's what you want to start off first. You're going to come in at an angle, kind of up. Get those edges to line up, just like that. And then if you look over here, you'll notice that the gas valve is up at an angle. You're going to push straight down. And it's still at that 45-degree angle. And once that's straight down and everything's locked in place, holding that down, you can now push this back to that little hole right here. And now that's in there. This is locked your gas valve or your gas tube, and all this assembly is safe to go. Now that we have our gas tube back in place, we're going to put our bolt assembly back in place. Like I said earlier, this is your actual bolt here, and I will make a separate video on the detailed disassembly of this. If you're interested in taking this apart, before I get this video up, or the bolt disassembly video, to get your firing pin out, which is this guy here, there's a pin here. You're going to push this out. You're going to have this head here. This will come straight out, and then you're going to be able, you can pull your firing pin right out. One thing you're going to want to note is that when you first check your firearm over before you take her out for a test ride, is that you want to make sure that your firing pin here can move. If it can move, then it's safe to go. But if your firing pin is stuck in the out position like this, that is a very big safety hazard. One note is that when you go to buy your gun, or when you buy your gun and you take it apart to clean it, you want to make sure you get the inside of this bolt very clean. What will happen is if there's any cosmoline in there that's dried up, if there's any obstructions of any sort that prevents this firing pin from moving back and forth like it's meant to, and it's locked up in the forward position, when you close your bolt with any ammo in your gun, it will fire automatically. You will not need to pull the trigger. And that's called a slam fire. And that's just the fact that this firing pin is protruding out to begin with, instead of when the hammer hits the actual back side of your firing pin. So you just want to make sure of that. Again, I do not recommend removing the extractors. They're just, on these older guns, I mean, you can, I mean, I always do when I first start out just to get them clean, but I mean, they are a pain and you have to be very careful because they break pretty easily. But with that, we're going to put our bolt assembly back in. You're just going to turn your gun up in the upright position, grab your bolt and your bolt carrier. Like I said, these will lock together like this. You just slide it right back in like this. They'll lock once you get them in place. You're going to slide it right forward. You can see there that they've locked. And then once you have your bolt carrier and your bolt all the way up against the chamber here, you're going to grab your spring. Like I said, the windy part is going to go in first. It's just going to go in right behind. You're just going to slide that right in. And then you can put your dust cover back on. You want to make sure that your takedown pin is out. This will slide right in. You'll push it in just a little bit against that spring. It'll be under tension, but not very much, just enough to mess it up. Slide this guy right back in. Dust cover's on, and then just to lock it, you slide it right back down to that little groove there. Alright guys, we're just going to put the stock right back on. If you did leave your bayonet on your SKS, you're going to want it out in the forward position to put your stock back on, whether you have the Tapco one or just the regular wooden one. What we're going to do here, it's pretty simple. You're just going to slide your receiver right back into place here. Just going to drop straight down in. I did note that when I first bought this stock, this was a pretty tight fit. You had to work it in when you go to put it back in. Oh, one more thing to mention, I'm sorry, is that this little lip here on your stock, you're going to want to make sure to put that in first. It's going to get that lined up properly before you decide to reinstall your stock. There we go. Now that's slid right back in. We're just going to put our trigger assembly back in, and this guy right here. You can take this thing apart if you want. Like I said, I wouldn't do it unless you knew what you were doing. It's all under spring tension. All it is a series of pins holding it together, and you got your hammer, your disconnector, your safety here. I mean, there's a lot of little parts that you could lose, and if you don't put it back together, it's just going to be a big headache. So just clean as best you can. Might do another video on that, how to take that apart later. Not quite sure yet, but for your basic disassembly, all you got to do is just clean it up real good. But now with the stock back in place, you're just going to put your stock upside down like this. You grab your trigger assembly. You got little lips here, right here. And these pins that are on the side here are going to go right underneath. Just like this. Just like that. You're going to lock back in, and then you're just going to place this straight down. Now to get this back on, you can do it how you want. I mean, a lot of people do it. Some people will hit it really hard, or slap it. It all depends on how strong that spring right here is. But in theory, all you have to do is to push it back down. Like I said, sometimes that's easier said than done. But let's see if we can't get it here. Oh, one thing you want to note is that when you go to put this back on, you want to have your safety engaged. This is ready to fire, and that's engaged. If you don't do that, you won't be able to lock this back down. Like I said, sometimes this can be a bit of a pain. Sucker's really on there. There we go. I got a pretty strong spring on mine, so like I said, once you get that part to grab onto your trigger guard, you're ready to go. Now it's just a matter of putting your grip back on and function test your gun. You can put your bayonet back down. That groove there is why you want to have that in the forward position when you go to take your stock off, otherwise it'll get in the way. But that's the basic disassembly of the SKS rifle. I will put the grip on here, and all we got to do now is to function test the gun. Yep. Working pretty good. So there we are.
Go.
Like I said, all you gotta do is put this grip back on. I'm not gonna bore you with me trying to put the screw back in. Once you got it in, your rifle's back together.
SKS takedown video.